The great hall of Etherian Prime stretched into the distance like a crystal canyon. Light moved through the walls in patterns that had no name in any human language. High Observer Kelthera stood before the council, her form shifting with colors that showed her excitement. For 50,000 years, the Ascendant had ruled the stars. They had seen everything. They had mapped 10,000 worlds and met 10,000 species. None of them had ever been a threat. The Ascendant were simply too advanced, too powerful, too far beyond everyone else. Council Prime Vorish leaned forward. His ancient eyes held the wisdom of 100 lifetimes. He spoke in tones that made the air vibrate. "What have you found, Observer?" Kelthera touched the display. Images appeared in the air above them. Ships. Thousands of ships. They were crude things made of metal and fire, but they moved with purpose. A new species, Council Prime. They call themselves humans. We found them in the outer spiral arm. They are fighting a war. The council members looked at each other. War. The word felt strange and old. The Ascendant had not known war for 8,000 years. They barely remembered what it meant. How primitive, one council member said. Fighting over resources, no doubt. Kelthera nodded slowly. That is what we thought at first. But there is something strange about them. Our scout ship, the Luminous Thought, has been watching them for 3 cycles now. The humans fight in ways we have never seen. She showed them more images. Human ships crashed into each other on purpose. Crews kept fighting even when their ships were falling apart. Soldiers held positions that could not be held. They died for inches of ground that had no value. They are inefficient, Vorish said. They waste their lives. Yes, Council Prime. But they do not stop. Even when they lose, they keep fighting. Even when it makes no sense, they keep fighting. We do not understand why. The council was quiet for a long moment. They had studied war as a historical curiosity. Ancient species fought wars. Young species fought wars. But they always stopped when the cost became too high. That was logical. That was rational. These humans did not seem rational. Perhaps they do not understand mathematics, another council member suggested. Perhaps they cannot calculate the odds. Kelthera shook her head. They understand. They know they are going to die. But they charge forward anyway. It is like they have accepted death before the battle even begins. Vorish studied the images. He saw human faces in the recordings. They looked afraid. Good. Fear was rational. Fear kept species alive. But these humans ran toward danger while they were afraid. That made no sense. We should study them more closely, Vorish decided. Establish an observation post. Do not interfere. Just watch. Perhaps we can learn why they behave this way. As you command, Council Prime. Kelthera left the great hall and returned to her ship. She had studied thousands of species in her long life, but none of them had ever made her feel this strange sensation. Was it curiosity? Or was it something else? 3 weeks later, the observation post was ready. It hung in space at the edge of human territory, invisible to their primitive sensors. Kelthera and her team watched the humans fight. The war was between 2 human factions, the Terran Coalition and the Free Colonies. They had been fighting for 12 years. 12 years of constant violence. The Ascendant could not understand it. Look at this battle, one of Kelthera's assistants said. He pointed to a screen. The Coalition is losing. Their ships are outnumbered 3-1. Logic says they should retreat. But they are not retreating. Kelthera watched. The human ships were small and damaged. They should have run. But instead they turned and fought. One ship rammed directly into an enemy vessel. Both ships exploded in a ball of fire. Why would they do that? The assistant whispered. Kelthera had no answer. They watched for hours. The battle was chaos. Ships twisted and burned. Explosions lit up the dark. And through it all, the humans kept fighting, even when their shields failed. Even when their weapons stopped working. They rammed. They used escape pods as missiles. They fought with everything they had. When the battle finally ended, only 2 human ships remained. Both sides had lost hundreds of vessels. Thousands of humans were dead. And for what? A small moon that had no resources worth fighting for. This is madness, Kelthera said quietly. But deep inside, in a place she did not want to look, she felt something new. Something the Ascendant had not felt in thousands of years. It was the first small seed of fear. She did not recognize it yet. But it was there, growing in the dark. Because for the first time in 50,000 years, the Ascendant had found something they did not understand. And what you do not understand can hurt you. The humans had rules that made no sense. They had courage that looked like stupidity. They had determination that seemed impossible. And they were coming closer to Ascendant space with every battle. Admiral Elena Cross stood on the bridge of the TCS Defiant. Around her, screens showed the battle. Her fleet was losing. Again. The free colonies had more ships, more guns, more soldiers. But the Terran coalition kept fighting. They had to. Behind them were their homes. Their families. Everything they loved. Status report, she said calmly. Her tactical officer looked up. His face was pale. We have lost the Valiant and the Guardian. The Sentinel is badly damaged. We are down to 6 ships, Admiral. 6 ships against 20. The math was simple. They could not win this fight. Tell the Sentinel to fall back, Cross ordered. All other ships target their flagship. Full weapons, Admiral, they outnumber us. If we attack now, we will lose, Cross smiled. It was not a happy smile. Then we make sure they remember what it cost them. The Defiant surged forward. The other ships followed. They fired everything they had. Missiles streaked through space. Energy beams cut through the dark. High above the battle, Kelthera watched from her invisible observation post. She could not look away. The humans were magnificent and terrible at the same time. They know they will die, one of her assistants said. Look at their communications. They are saying goodbye to each other. Kelthera listened to the human radio channels. The voices were calm. Too calm. This is Lieutenant Chen on the Fury. It has been an honor serving with you all. Captain Rodriguez here. Give them hell, people. Make every shot count. From Admiral Cross came a single transmission. For Earth, for home, for everyone we could not save. The human ships crashed into the enemy line. Explosions bloomed like deadly flowers. The Fury took a direct hit and broke apart. The Hammer lost its engines but kept firing. The Defiant rammed an enemy cruiser and both ships went dark. When the fighting stopped, only one coalition ship remained. It was drifting, its hull cracked and leaking air. But it had destroyed 6 enemy vessels. 6 ships for 20. The colonies had won the battle, but they had paid in blood. I do not understand, Kelthera whispered. This makes no tactical sense. They gained nothing. They lost everything. Her assistant pulled up more data. Observer, you need to see this. I have been studying human military history. They have been fighting wars for their entire existence. All species fight when they are young, Kelthera said. Not like this. The humans have destroyed themselves multiple times. Nuclear wars. Chemical wars. Biological plagues. They came close to extinction at least 7 times in their history. But they survived. And every time they survived, they became harder to kill. Kelthera looked at the records. Images of old Earth, cities in ruins, mushroom clouds rising over dead lands, millions dead. And yet the humans kept going. They rebuilt, they grew, they reached for the stars. They are a trauma species, her assistant said quietly. Their whole civilization is built on surviving the impossible. They expect to lose. They plan for it. But they never stop trying to win. Over the next weeks, Kelthera studied the humans more carefully. She watched them fight on planets and in space. She saw patterns that disturbed her. Human soldiers dug trenches and held them for weeks with no supplies. They ate rations that barely kept them alive. They drank recycled water. They slept in the mud. And they did not complain. They just kept fighting. On one planet, she watched a small human unit defend a bridge. There were only 30 soldiers. The enemy sent 300. The humans should have retreated. But they stayed. For 3 days, those 30 humans held that bridge. They used every trick they knew. They set traps. They used the terrain. They made the enemy pay for every meter. When reinforcements finally arrived, only 5 humans were still alive. General Marcus Webb led the reinforcements. Kelthera listened to his words through her sensors. You held them, Webb said to the survivors. You held them when no one thought you could. Because of you, we saved 10,000 civilians. Your friends did not die for nothing. One of the soldiers looked up at him. His face was covered in dirt and blood. Sir, we would do it again. For them, for home, we would do it again. Kelthera felt that strange sensation again. It was stronger now. These humans were not fighting for resources. They were not fighting for power. They were fighting because they believed their sacrifice meant something. That made them unpredictable. That made them dangerous. She decided it was time for direct contact. The council needed to speak with the humans. Perhaps if they talked, they could understand these strange creatures better. A human scout ship found the observation post 3 days later. It was an accident. The humans were mapping the sector and their sensors had gotten better. They detected the energy signature. Kelthera decided to reveal herself. She sent a message in basic mathematics, the universal language. The humans responded quickly. Dr. Yuki Tanaka led the human first contact team. She was a xenobiologist, someone who studied alien life. She approached the meeting with caution but also curiosity. The meeting took place on a neutral station. Kelthera appeared as a projection of light and color. Tanaka was a small woman with sharp eyes that missed nothing. "You have been watching us," Tanaka said. It was not a question. "Yes, we are observers. We study other species. We mean you no harm." Tanaka smiled slightly. "Good, we have enough enemies already." "I must ask you a question," Kelthera said. "Why do you fight this way? You lose so many. You sacrifice so much. Any logical species would have negotiated peace long ago." Tanaka was quiet for a long moment. Then she spoke softly. "Because everything we love is behind us. We fight because if we stop, our families die. Our children die. Our worlds burn. We have seen it happen before. So we fight, not because we are brave, not because we like war. We fight because we refuse to let fear control us." Kelthera did not respond. She could not. For the first time in her long life, she truly understood what it meant to be desperate, and desperation made creatures do impossible things. The humans were not warriors. They were survivors, and survivors were the most dangerous kind of enemy. The war changed direction like a wounded animal. The free colonies pushed deeper into space, chasing the coalition forces. And suddenly, they were at the edge of Ascendant territory. Council Prime Voresh watched the reports with growing concern. The humans were getting too close. Their battles were spilling into neutral space. Soon they would cross into Ascendant systems. "We must intervene," one council member said. "We cannot allow them to bring their violence to our borders." Voresh agreed. He sent a diplomatic vessel to the war zone. The ship was beautiful and ancient, covered in symbols of peace. It broadcast messages in every language: "Stop, do not come closer. This space is protected." The humans ignored the warnings. They were too focused on killing each other. A coalition ship, damaged and desperate, fled into neutral space. 3 colony ships followed. They fired without thinking about where they were. One missile went wide. It struck the Ascendant diplomatic vessel. The ship exploded in a flash of light. 20 Ascendant diplomats died instantly. They had not felt fear in thousands of years. They died confused, not understanding what had happened. Both human factions stopped fighting immediately. They sent rescue ships. They tried to help. But it was too late. The damage was done. For the first time in 8,000 years, the Ascendant mobilized their military. It was small compared to their ancient glory. Most of their weapons had been converted to peaceful uses long ago, but what they had was still far beyond anything the humans possessed. Commander Wraith led the peacekeeping fleet. He was old even by Ascendant standards. He had studied military history as a hobby. Now he was being asked to actually use that knowledge. The fleet appeared in human space like a wall of silver light. 50 ships, each one larger and more advanced than anything humanity had ever built. They did not fire. They just positioned themselves between the warring factions. "This is Commander Wraith of the Ascendant Peacekeeping Force. You will cease all hostilities. You will retreat to your respective territories. You will not bring your violence into our space again." The humans should have listened. The Ascendant ships were clearly superior. Any rational species would have retreated. But humans were not always rational. A coalition captain, furious at losing the battle, fired on a colony ship that was trying to retreat. The shot went wide and hit an Ascendant vessel. The damage was minimal, just scratches on the shield. But it was an act of aggression. Wraith ordered his ships to disable the human vessels. They used precise weapons, targeting engines and weapon systems. They did not want to kill anyone. They just wanted to stop the fighting. The humans had other ideas. Admiral Cross saw the Ascendant ships as a new threat. Her people were losing the war. Maybe if she could capture some of that advanced technology, she could turn the tide. It was desperate. It was stupid. But she was out of options. All ships concentrate fire on the lead Ascendant vessel. Target their engines. We need that technology. The human ships opened fire with everything they had. The Ascendant shields held easily. But Wraith was shocked. These creatures were attacking someone who was trying to help them. It made no sense. Disable them, he ordered. Use minimum force. The Ascendant ships fired. Precise beams of energy struck human vessels, knocking out their systems. But the humans adapted with terrifying speed. They angled their armor. They used debris as cover. They scattered in patterns that were hard to predict, and then they did something that shocked everyone. 3 human ships positioned themselves directly in the path of Ascendant fire, protecting the damaged vessels behind them. They took the hits deliberately. Their shields failed. Their hulls cracked. But they bought time for the others. Wraith watched in horror as one human ship, its power failing, used its last momentum to drift toward an Ascendant cruiser. The intent was clear. They were going to board. Stop them. Disable that ship. Too late. The human ship crashed into the cruiser's docking bay. Alarm screamed. Atmospheric breach. The humans were inside. Marine Sarah Chen led the boarding party. She was young, barely 25, but she had survived 4 major battles. Her armor was scratched and dented. Her rifle was an old model that jammed sometimes, but she knew how to fight, move. Secure the corridor. Watch the corners. The Ascendant crew did not know what to do. They had never fought inside their own ships. They had weapons, but they were ceremonial. They barely knew how to use them. Commander Wraith grabbed a weapon and ran to the breach. He had to stop this. He had to show these humans they could not win. He turned a corner and came face to face with Sarah Chen. She was wounded. Blood ran down her side. Her armor was cracked, but her rifle was pointed directly at him. And her eyes were calm and determined. Drop your weapon, she said. Wraith should have fired. But something in her eyes stopped him. She was afraid. He could see it. But she was not backing down. She would shoot him if he did not surrender, and she would die doing it. In that moment, Wraith understood what Kelthera had been trying to tell the Council. These humans were not brave. They were terrified. But they fought anyway. They fought because giving up was worse than dying. That was what made them dangerous. He dropped his weapon. Stand down, Marine. We need to talk. Chen kept her rifle up. You attacked us. We were trying to stop you from killing each other. You fired on our ships. You were in our way. Wraith felt that strange sensation that Kelthera had described. It crawled up his spine like ice. It made his hands shake. It made him want to run. It was fear, not fear of death. The Ascendant had long ago accepted that they were mortal. It was fear of the unknown, fear of creatures who did not follow the rules, fear of people who could look at certain death and charge forward anyway. Behind Chen, more human soldiers appeared. They were all wounded. They were all exhausted, but they stood ready to fight. We need to stop this, Wraith said quietly. All of us, before more people die. Chen lowered her rifle slightly. Then tell your ships to back off and you tell yours. They stared at each other for a long moment. Then Chen nodded slowly. Truce. For now, the fighting stopped. Both human factions pulled back. The Ascendant fleet held position. And in the quiet that followed, Council Prime Vorish received a message from Wraith. We have a problem, Council Prime. The humans are not like any species we have encountered. They do not fear death. They fear failure, and that makes them unpredictable. That makes them dangerous. Vorish sat in his chambers for a long time after reading that message. Around him, his advisors argued about what to do. But he barely heard them. Kelthera stood before a wall of data. It showed everything the Ascendant had learned about humanity in the past 3 months. History, biology, culture, psychology. She had studied it all. And the more she learned, the more disturbed she became. Earth was a death world. That was the only way to describe it. The gravity was heavy. The weather was violent. Diseases killed millions. Predators hunted in the night. The planet itself seemed designed to kill anything living on it. And yet humans had not just survived, they had thrived. She pulled up images of Earth history, the Great Wars, nuclear weapons that could destroy cities in seconds, chemical weapons that melted flesh, biological weapons that turned the body against itself. Humans had invented 1,000 ways to kill each other. But they had also invented medicine to heal, art to inspire, music to comfort. They were capable of great cruelty and great kindness, sometimes in the same moment. They are contradictions, she said to herself. They love and they hate. They build and they destroy. They fear death, but they embrace it. Council Prime Voresh appeared beside her. His hologram flickered in the dim light. "What have you learned, Observer?" Kelthera turned to face him. "I have learned that we do not understand them at all, Council Prime. We thought they were primitive. We thought they were irrational. But they are neither. They are simply different. Explain." She pulled up more data. "We evolved in peace, Council Prime. Our world was gentle. We had no natural predators. Food was abundant. We grew slowly, carefully over millions of years. We learned cooperation because we never needed to fight." She changed the display to show Earth. Humans evolved in war. Every day was a battle for survival. They competed with predators that were faster and stronger. They survived ice ages that should have killed them. They faced diseases that wiped out entire populations. They learned to fight because everything on their world wanted them dead. Borish studied the images. "So they are naturally violent." "No, they are naturally survivors. Violence is just one tool they use, but they also use cooperation, strategy, deception, sacrifice. They do whatever it takes to keep their people alive." "I have arranged a meeting with their leaders," Kelthera continued. "Admiral Cross and Dr. Tanaka will represent the coalition. Perhaps if we talk to them directly, we can understand better." The meeting took place on a neutral station 3 days later. Admiral Cross looked tired. She had lost so many ships, so many people, but her eyes were still sharp. Dr. Tanaka sat beside her, calm and professional. Behind them stood Commander Wraith representing the Ascendant military. "Why do you fight?" Borish asked. His voice was gentle but firm. "You have lost so much. Your people are dying. Your worlds are burning. Why not negotiate peace?" Cross leaned forward. "Have you ever had something you loved more than your own life?" The Ascendant were quiet. Love was not something they understood the same way. They cared for their civilization, but it was more duty than emotion. "I fight because my daughter is on Earth," Cross said quietly. "She is 8 years old. She likes to draw pictures of stars. If I stop fighting, the colonies will reach Earth and she will die, so I do not stop." "I cannot stop," Tanaka spoke next. "We are not brave, Council Prime. We are terrified. Every single day. But we learned something a long time ago. Fear either paralyzes you or it makes you dangerous. We chose to be dangerous." Kelthera felt something shift inside her. She finally understood. Humans did not fight because they wanted to. They fought because everything they loved was behind them. They had no choice. "What would you do in our place?" Cross asked. "If your families were threatened, if your worlds were burning, would you negotiate? Or would you fight?" Borish had no answer. Over the next weeks, Kelthera studied human culture more deeply. She watched their art. She listened to their music. She read their stories. Human art was filled with war, songs about soldiers who never came home, paintings of battles long past, stories of sacrifice and loss. But there was also hope. Always hope. Even in their darkest moments, humans believed tomorrow could be better. She found memorials on every human world. Walls covered with names. Millions of names. The dead remembered forever. Humans did not forget their sacrifices. They carried them like weights on their souls. That was why they fought so hard. Because they knew the cost. They had paid it before, and they would pay it again if they had to. One day, a group of human refugees arrived at an Ascendant station. They were fleeing the war. Families with children. Old people who could barely walk. All of them looking for safety. The Ascendant provided food and shelter. They had plenty. It cost them nothing. Kelthera watched as the humans settled in. She saw a mother holding her child, tears running down her face. Thank you so much. You saved us." The mother was so grateful for something the Ascendant barely noticed. Food, water, a safe place to sleep, basic things. But to these humans it was everything. Kelthera spoke with the refugees. She learned their stories. One man had been a teacher. He had stayed behind when his city was evacuated, helping others escape. He was the last one to leave. "Why did you stay?" she asked. "You could have died." The teacher smiled sadly. "Someone had to. Those were children. Someone had to make sure they got out." That was the human paradox. They could be incredibly violent, but they could also be incredibly kind. They would die for strangers if it meant something. Kelthera reported her findings to the council. "I believe I understand them now," she said. "They do not fight because they are strong. They fight because they refuse to let their fear win. They refuse to give up. They refuse to let their people die without a fight. Vorish listened carefully. So what do you recommend? We should help them end their war, not through force, through understanding. They are destroying themselves because they see no other option. Perhaps we can show them another way. But before the council could act, everything changed. A new threat appeared in the sector. Ships that belonged to no known species. They attacked without warning. They destroyed colony worlds. They killed everything in their path. The raiders had arrived, and they made the human war look like a children's game. The Ascendant faced their first real enemy in thousands of years. And they discovered something terrible. They had forgotten how to fight. The raiders came like a storm. 20 massive ships dropped out of nowhere and attacked an Ascendant colony world. They did not negotiate. They did not demand anything. They just killed. The Ascendant defense fleet arrived too late. The colony was burning. 2 million people were dead. Council Prime Vorish stood in the command center staring at the reports. Around him, his advisors were silent. They had no experience with this. They had no answers. For the first time in 50,000 years, the Ascendant were truly afraid. Deploy all available ships, Vorish ordered. We must protect our worlds, but the advisors looked uncertain. Council Prime, our ships are designed for peacekeeping. We have the technology to defend, but our crews do not know how to fight. Not really, then they will learn, Vorish said. But his voice shook. The next raider attack came 3 days later. This time, the Ascendant fleet was ready. 50 ships against 20. The odds were in their favor. But when the raiders opened fire, the Ascendant fleet froze. The commanders were overwhelmed. They had studied tactics. They had run simulations. But facing real violence was different. It was chaos. It was terror. The raiders cut through the Ascendant ships like they were made of paper. Advanced technology meant nothing if you did not know how to use it in battle. Commander Wraith watched his fleet fall apart. Ships scattered. Formations broke. Panic spread through the communications channels. They were losing badly. And then, from across the sector, came a message. This is Admiral Elena Cross of the Terran Coalition. We are detecting heavy combat in your sector. Do you need assistance? Wraith looked at his tactical display. He was losing. His people were dying. Pride said he should refuse. But survival said something else. Yes, we need help. The human fleet arrived 30 minutes later. It was small, only 12 ships. They were battered and old. Some were held together with spare parts and hope, but they moved with purpose. Cross transmitted a battle plan. It was simple, brutal, but it might work. Ascendant vessels will provide shield support and heavy firepower. Human ships will handle close combat and boarding actions. We hit them fast and we hit them hard. Understood? Wraith looked at the plan. It required the Ascendant ships to put themselves in danger. It required trust. He took a deep breath. Understood. All Ascendant ships follow Coalition lead. The combined fleet attacked. Ascendant ships moved forward, their massive shields absorbing raider fire. Behind them, human ships darted in and out, targeting weak points. They were like wolves hunting a bear, small, fast, deadly. Marine Sarah Chen led another boarding action. This time, Commander Wraith went with her. He needed to see how humans fought up close. He needed to understand. They breached a raider ship. The corridors were dark and twisted. The raiders were big and armored. But Chen moved without fear. She used every advantage, cover, surprise, teamwork. Wraith watched her work. She was wounded again. Blood stained her armor. But she kept moving. Kept fighting. She protected her team. She made split-second decisions. She did what needed to be done. A raider appeared from a side passage. Wraith froze. But Chen did not. She fired twice. The raider fell. Move. She shouted at him. Do not stop. Never stop. And suddenly Wraith understood. This was what humans knew. This was what they had learned. You did not think about the fear. You did not think about the pain. You just moved forward. Always forward. He raised his weapon and followed her. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it ended, 15 raider ships were destroyed. 5 had fled. The Ascendant had lost 8 vessels. The humans had lost 4. But they had won. In the aftermath, Cross and Vorish met again. Both were exhausted. Both had lost people. But they were alive. Thank you, Vorish said quietly. You saved us, Cross shook her head. We helped each other. Your shields kept us alive. Our tactics gave you a chance. Together we won. The human civil war ended the next week. Both sides agreed to a ceasefire. The raiders were a bigger threat. They had to work together now. Vorish proposed an alliance. The Ascendant would help rebuild human worlds. They would share technology. In return, humans would teach the Ascendant how to fight, how to survive when everything was against you. It was agreed. Over the next months, human advisors arrived on Ascendant worlds. They were soldiers, Marines, veterans who had seen too much war. They did not teach violence for its own sake. They taught survival. Sarah Chen became an instructor. Young Ascendant learned from her. They learned how to push through fear, how to trust their team, how to make hard decisions quickly. She was patient with them. They were not warriors. They did not need to be, but they needed to know how to protect what they loved, and she could teach them that. 1 year after the first contact, Kelthara and Dr. Tanaka stood on a hill overlooking a new memorial. It was being built on the border between human and Ascendant space, a wall covered with names. Human and Ascendant dead from the Raider War, together. Do you still think we are barbaric? Tanaka asked quietly. Kelthara was quiet for a long moment. No, I think you are survivors, and you taught us something important. What is that? That fear is not weakness. Fear is natural. What matters is what you do with it. You can let it control you, or you can use it to protect what matters. You chose the second path, and now you have taught us to do the same. Tanaka smiled. We learned that the hard way. Over thousands of years, through countless wars, we almost destroyed ourselves learning it. Then we are fortunate that you survived to teach us, Kelthara said. Because now we face the universe together. On Etherion Prime, Council Prime Vorish addressed his people. It was broadcast across all Ascendant worlds. For 50,000 years we have known peace. We thought we had moved beyond the need for warriors. We thought we were above such things. But we were wrong. Not about peace. Peace is still our goal. But we were wrong to think peace meant we would never need to fight. The humans showed us something important. Strength is not about never feeling afraid. Strength is about protecting what you love even when you are terrified. They fought not because they enjoyed war, but because everything they cared about was behind them. Today, we establish the Academy of Necessary War. It will teach us not violence, but the will to defend what matters. The humans will guide us, and together we will build a future where peace is not just a hope, but something worth fighting for. The Ascendant people listened. Some were afraid, some were uncertain, but they understood. The universe was not as safe as they had thought, and they needed to be ready. Admiral Cross attended the ceremony when the academy opened. She stood beside Vorish and watched young Ascendant enter the doors. They looked nervous. That was good. Fear kept you sharp. Will they be ready? Vorish asked. Cross nodded slowly. If they learn what we have to teach, yes. They will never be like us. They should not be. But they will learn to stand their ground. They will learn to protect their people. That is all that matters. The raiders attacked twice more in the following years. Each time the combined fleet drove them back. The Ascendant were getting better. They were learning. They were becoming what they needed to be, not warriors, defenders, and the humans. They finally found peace. The coalition and the colonies merged into one government. The fighting stopped. The rebuilding began. It would take decades, maybe centuries, but they would do it. Because that was what humans did. They survived. They rebuilt. They kept going. Years later, Sarah Chen stood in front of a class of young Ascendant recruits. They looked at her with wide eyes. She was a legend now. The human who had fought in 100 battles and survived. What is the most important lesson? One student asked. Chen thought for a moment. Then she answered, the most important lesson is this. Being afraid does not make you weak. Running away when your people need you, that makes you weak. Fear is just a feeling. What you do with that feeling, that is what defines you. She looked at each of them in turn. You will be afraid, all of you, when the time comes, but you will stand anyway, because behind you are your families, your friends, your worlds, everything you love, and you do not let fear decide their fate. You do, the students nodded. They understood, and somewhere far away on 100 worlds, the alliance between humans and Ascendant grew stronger. They built together. They learned from each other. The Ascendant gained the will to fight. The humans gained the technology to survive. Nothing in the universe had made the Ascendant afraid for 50,000 years. Then they met humanity. They met creatures who knew fear intimately but refused to bow to it. They met survivors who had faced extinction and kept fighting. And in learning to fear, the Ascendant learned something more important. They learned courage.